Okay, so welcome everyone to the cert-manager bi-weekly meeting on the 28th of July 2021. We've got the usual JetStack people today, and Tim and Ash, who are both doing Google Summer of Code stuff for cert-manager. I think we're going to start off with Tim presenting some stuff that he's been working on. He's done a bunch of stuff. We're going to see some of that. After that, I think there's a few points of discussion that we probably need to address as well. Tim, do you want to just get cracking?
Yeah, so I will first present maybe the check API command. This command performs a dry run creation of a certificate. This is done to check if the API is already ready. So if the CA bundles are not yet injected into the CRDs or into the webhook definitions, then the Kubernetes API will give an error. And this API, this check tries to do it. It catches these errors and it prints them to the console. And you can also specify a wait command, and there, if you specify that, then it will retry the check. So this tool can be used to wait for the cert-manager API to become ready after you've installed cert-manager, after you've done a clean install. So now my cert-manager API is ready, but if I were to uninstall cert-manager, let's see, I'll maybe just remove my cluster. Yeah, sorry for the waiting. But once my cluster is set up, then I can show you that the command will fail normally. So here it says not ready. The cert-manager CRD is not yet installed on the Kubernetes API server. And now if I start installing, and we'll see that this check will return different errors, and then eventually it should return with okay, successful. The dry run was successful. So you see now it already detected that there is that the CRDs are installed, but the webhook deployment is not yet ready. And we also see here some checks. These checks on the left side are just checking if the deployment is ready. On the right side, we are checking if the CA injector also injected the CA bundles into the right resources. Okay, so now we see that the API is ready. So now we can create resources like certificate, like issuers against the Kubernetes API. And we know that the API is ready. So that was the check API command. And now we can also do we can also use the other tool that I've been working on. That's the version command. Version command now also returns the version of cert-manager that is installed. So you see that I have installed version 1.4.1. That's the version that it's detected in the cluster. The way this tool does this, it first looks for the CRDs, and it looks at the annotations in the CRDs. The latest version should have some kind of Kubernetes app Kubernetes version, I think, annotation that indicates what the version is. Otherwise, it might try to find these versions in the Helm annotations. And if those annotations are just totally missing, then it will try to fetch the webhook from the CRD. And from that webhook, it will try to go to the service, go to the pod, and then in the pod, the image tag is used as the version. But that's still something that I'm working on, so it's not merged yet. And still can still change the API. Okay, so that was it for me. Other things that I've been working on are, for example, the leader election. That's very recent. There's some changes there where now when the context is cancelled of the server, the leader frees up the lease that it has on the leader election so that new leaders can more quickly acquire that lease. That was merged very recently. And also I'm still working on the Helm charts and improving the generation of JSON schemas and the values .yaml file, and seeing how we can create a better Helm experience for the Helm users. Okay.
That was really cool. Thank you for presenting that. Did anyone have any questions for Tim or anything, or shall we move on? I'm going to take silence to mean move on. So thanks, Tim. So we've got a few items for discussion on the agenda of varying priority, I suppose. The first one we might as well start with is around backporting and what we're going to backport in the very near future, the next couple of days, for cert-manager 1.4 and potentially 1.3 in some cases, because both are still supported versions today when we're recording this. 1.5 is due to be released in a few weeks' time. So there is currently a thread ongoing about this in Kubernetes Slack, which I will link in chat if anyone wants to open it up. So this thread, it's not like a list or anything, but it mentions 3 different backports that we might want to consider. So there's, first of all, there is this PR. This fixes a bug which is present in 1.4, was introduced in 1.4. I don't think there's any controversy at all about merging this. It seems it's been reviewed by several people. It only affects 1.4. I think this is going in 1.4.2, whenever the actual PR is merged. That's to fix erroneously removing an intermediate from a chain when constructing a final chain to write to a secret or wherever. There is another potential thing that could go in, which is this PR fixing a memory leak in a Go routine, which was committed by Mayol. This one is more controversial, I think, in the Slack chat so far. And this, I believe, I'm correct in saying this would also affect 1.3. So this would also be backported to 1.3 as it's currently a supported version. Does anyone have anything they want to say about this PR, this memory leak fix?
So the discussion is mainly about the controversy is we're not 100% sure whether the change is completely okay, because it's very difficult to test with our current tests. So basically, the cause of this memory leak is a go routine leak where we don't stop a timer that checks for that's fired when it's renewed, when a certificate is due to be renewed, when forgetting about that certificate's existence. So then these go routines just hang around forever. I think that's a brief summary of the bug. So Mail found the bug and added logic to stop the timer, which removes the go routine when a work item is processed. And this seems perfectly reasonable. The only worry is that there could be an edge case left behind that means that a completely valid certificate never gets renewed because there's no test for this. I think this, as a slight aside, I think this is another downside to our old 1 hour minimum certificate duration thing, where we can't have a nice end-to-end test that takes like a minute, say, to renew a certificate a few times because our minimum duration is an hour. So I think as a result of that thread, Mail offered to change the PR slightly, but I wasn't following it, so I can you show what you, say what you suggested.
Yeah, thanks for the explanation. This is great. Yeah, so in this PR that I got merged, I did two things. The first thing was to fix the bug. The bug was due to this stop function that we thought was closing a channel, but wasn't. This is uncontroversial. This is not controversial, and this is well tested. There is a unit test, and there are proofs that the leakage does not happen anymore. So that's cool. The second thing I changed is to add 2 lines where it says forget. So in the Acme order controller and in the trigger controller, there is a line where you can see forget certificate or forget order, depending. And this is controversial because I didn't find a way to test this. It's only 2 lines, but actually, this is not the source of the memory leak, so I shouldn't have put that inside this PR. So what I would suggest is to remove this forget thing. Because that's the source of, like, we don't know what's, like, I can't 100% sure say that it won't affect, like, it won't cancel a renewal for some reason. So yeah, I propose to remove this forget thing and maybe to do it later. So the PR I just linked is not what I just said. I changed as James said in some thread on Slack. He proposed to only do the forget function when we delete the order or the certificate. But I think, again, it's not tested, so I can't say anything. I would prefer not. I would remove this forget for now. It is still going to be a memory leak, but it's a tiny one compared to the trigger controller one.
And the order that you want to test has nothing to do with the 1 hour constraint, right? That's just a trigger controller, which means you can't test it. Is that right?
Sorry, I have a hard time understanding.
I'm probably way off. No, ignore me.
So you said
different things.
No, sorry. It's just that I cannot hear you.
Already?
Yeah, it's far or something. Could you repeat?
Is that better?
Oh yes, thanks. That's much better.
For now.
what was I saying? Yes, the 1 hour duration constraint. That can only be tested by that could be tested by changing the 1 hour constraint, but the order change
Yeah,
can't. Is that
you're
correct?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, that's a good point, Josh. We would only be able to test the trigger controller with this change.
So I think at least, or perhaps a good idea would be to make that 1 hour constraint configurable in the code, but not expose it to users. So I think changing the default value anyway is like another discussion, but we could at least make that value configurable in the code, and then in our testing, like an integration and test or something, change it to a different value.
Yeah. And then we could have an end-to-end test for renewing that would only take a minute and say renew something 3 times.
Not end to end, because that's like an actual binary and we don't want to expose the value, but an integration test would be fine, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Why? that would be really nice to have integration tests around this. I was thinking about unit tests for this, like checking that we actually that it is wired properly. That what the thing that I changed actually does something. But yeah, this idea of having this hidden flag or whatever, that would be nice to have hidden flags, like flags that are not, that cannot be listed in the help command.
You
can do that.
poo-pooed my leader election one, though.
What?
You poo-pooed my leader election one this morning.
So you could, you wanted to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you couldn't use it anymore.
Well, I wanted to deprecate it and hide it. But I guess we could just hide it if we really wanted
But
to.
so no one is using that? Am I the only one using it?
Hope not. What is the
It's on
reason
by
to use it,
default.
though?
Yeah, it's just that.
Should we maybe stay on the track of what we're going to backport?
Yeah,
because
sorry.
we're out of time, I think.
Thanks, Ashley.
So, in terms of what you just said, Maya, it sounds like we might want to make more changes to be able to better test this before we backport anything. Is that a fair summary? So I suspect this isn't going to get into 1.4.2.
Yeah, at least remove the forget part, which has not been tested. There is no test around it.
Okay.
So one part is well tested, well understood, and I'm really confident with this. The other part, which 2 lines, these forget functions, I'm not confident, and
So
we should either remove it or just not backport it, maybe.
So
Is it not?
Sorry, go on.
Is it not possible to cherry pick just the first commit from his PR, which has the thing that we wanted, or we
Yeah,
don't?
that's a good point. Actually, yeah, there are 2 very separate commits.
Yeah, just someone has to do it by hand, which just is not hard. It just takes command rather than a comment.
What do you think?
Sounds good. If we're confident about that specific bit, then yeah, why not? We can cherry pick that, I suppose, for version 1.4.2 and a new version of 1.3, because it seems this would also apply in 1.3, right? So that would be easy enough. If we can get the hash, the SHA hash of the git commit to be cherry picked.
Yeah, I'll add that. Just one question. This is not really a critical bug, right? The memory leak.
Critical, no, but if like memory leaks are bugs.
Oh yeah,
for sure. So if people disagree with backporting it on some grounds, then now would be the time to say. I just kind of assumed we would. It seems reasonable to backport this.
We should.
I think it's a critical bug. Yeah.
It is critical because if you have a large cert-manager installation, it crashes it.
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's a good point.
And you think like there are customers running cert-manager on like basically Raspberry Pis in places. and I think we should look after them.
But it's been leaking memory for the last how many releases? It's not something we introduced in 1.4.
Oh,
is it?
forever.
So it's not.
It's 0.16, I think.
Well, I suppose the
So
risk
another
of
question. So the rationale for not backporting the forget parts is that there's no unit test for it. But doesn't that also apply to the 1.5 release? I don't quite understand how. Are we saying it's okay for this code to go into 1.5 but not to go into 1.4?
But the thing is, for 1.5 we have alphas and betas, so at least we have that. But here for the patch release, we don't have anything. Like we're just releasing something, and
Yeah, but the idea that the very tiny proportion of users who might be affected by the hypothetical problem with this code would happen to also beta test seems unlikely, doesn't it? So it doesn't stack up to me. The arguments don't stack up. We've either got to unit test it before we release 1.5, or it shouldn't go into 1.5 either. Or we
I think you're no. To be honest, I was reluctant when we had this discussion with Airbay and I said, so we settled on saying that we should add a comment and say that it's fine. It shouldn't work. It shouldn't break anything. But thanks to the discussion, I realized that it was a bad idea.
The other thing I was going to say isn't.
So, yeah.
I think you say in the comment that there isn't a way in process item to know whether it's a deleted event. But I seem to remember, isn't there some sort of tombstone key or something like that? Something that does allow you to distinguish between
I don't. Yeah, I didn't know about that.
I can't remember. I seem to remember.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, there's a tombstone thing that I've never used, but
tombstone is to do with queues, the shutting down of queues. But there's something like that. I think.
Is it deletion timestamp? Well,
no, I can't remember. But I'll look at. I'll try and find. I'll just try and find I'll try and find what I think I can remember.
That's interesting if it is, because I've always been taught the controller runtime philosophy, which is you get an object coming in, and you should then look at the cluster to see what state the cluster's in, and then do a idempotent reconcile, which means that you don't really care what the event is, because you should be looking at the state and then driving the state towards where it should go. But if there is, that's interesting.
Do you mean with respect to the schedule work queue, or do you mean generally for all reconcilers?
Generally for all controllers.
Oh, okay.
I think Richard makes a fair point about unit testing this, but I guess if we can be confident that this one commit will cherry pick is unit tested, we might as well backport that, and then the others can be fixed in time. Will be eventually unit tested in some way. So that feels like the place that we're at is we're happy to cherry pick this, and this can be done.
Wait, sorry, it's two commits. The first is introducing the unit test that breaks things, and the second one is fixing it. So it would be two cherry picks.
I'm sure we'll manage to.
Mile, can I maybe ask you, because I do not fully understand this PR. So this queue, I think it's only used in case there is an error, right? So if there is an error, then there is an item added to this scheduled queue that schedules the item in the future. So one-time schedule of the item. Then that item is removed from the queue. So once the duration is hit, or once we are at that point in time, the item is removed from the queue and it's processed, right? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, so it's there are three places where this schedule add thing happens. There is when the certificate is failing, as you said. It is so when for some reason the signer has failed, you're going to wait for 1 hour, and that's going to use the scheduled work queue.
Mhm.
But that's not the source of the leakage. Actually, it could be. It could be. So if you have many failing certificates, then it is going to pile up coroutines, because when it adds a new timer, it's never cleaning up old timers. So yeah, you're right. But there is also the case where you have a renewal time on the certificate, and you want to schedule a renewal, like for example in 3 months, and so you have a timer for this also. And that's where I found that's where, when I reproduced the bug, that's where the majority of the memory leak came from.
Okay.
So right below the code that you were reading, you can see when there is a renewal time, then it's going to schedule everything.
And so the forget function, you call that because the item is processed, and this means that it shouldn't be processed in the future too, right?
So the are you looking at the process item thing
Yeah.
function? So when the reason why I do this is this scheduled work queue, the goal of this scheduled work queue is to resync an object.
Mhm.
And if you already resync the object now instead of within 3 months, then there is no point in having the resync happen within in 3 months. So you can just remove the timer with the forget function, and
that probably works for in case there is an error, but if there is an
I'm sorry, but we really are probably going to run out of time if we don't move on. So maybe
yeah,
discussion will be done
let's see.
offline.
Let's see later then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a third thing we were talking about, backporting, which is this here, which to me this seems very uncontroversial. Jake suggested it, Mile committed it. This seems like just a slam dunk. We add this and we backport it into both 1.4 and 1.3. Are we agreed on that?
Yeah. This is the concurrent map write error, which is just caused by manipulating the cache instead of copying before trying to update. And it's
This
only
would-
2 lines.
Yeah. This.
And we're on the way of finding a way to have it tested regularly, but it's not yet.
Okay. It certainly seems like there's a plurality of people who want to backport this. So if there are any concerns, stick them in cert-manager dev and we can come back to it. I think that covers all the backporting discussion for now. The next stuff on the agenda is CSR versus CR. So the Kubernetes certificate signing resource versus the certificate request resource that cert-manager provides. This was prompted by a comment on an issue asking us about adding arbitrary key usages, extended key usages rather, and other arbitrary things to certificates. And the question really is the extent to which we want to seek parity with upstream CSR resources. They don't support custom extended key usages. Certainly there's value in us reaching out to the upstream maintainers and saying like, hey, do you want to add this, so that we can keep more parity. But if we are going to down the road try and have a situation where cert-manager will create CSRs rather than CRs, it would become a hard requirement that they add something upstream before we ever touch it. My personal gut feeling is that probably we're never going to have that situation where we replace CR with CSR, or if we do, it will be optional, and if you lose out on a feature because of that, on your own head be it. I guess, is there anything that anyone wants to say about this, where regarding eventually replacing CR with CSR, or is there a slam dunk reason why we would never do that? Is it just going to, are we going to have to decide this at some point? Where are we at?
I think on the discussion of like opening pull requests upstream or like adding features upstream, in my opinion, is kind of like a non-starter. Like at least for me, I'd like to see features in the next couple of months, like and not the next 2 years, because of the kind of support cycle, release cadence, like the feature process in upstream Kubernetes, like adding a bunch of random fields to the kind of upstream resource, for me is just kind of a non-starter. There is like room to add or put these things in like annotations and stuff like that. That has its own issues. I'm not a huge fan of like annotation bloat. So yeah, I'm not too sure.
I echo that. I agree. I think we lose a lot of our ability to be nimble if we're stuck behind CSR. Plus, it's not namespaced and CR is, which is not irrelevant in the discussion.
Yeah,
I kind of view maybe a world where we are the standard setters with CR, and we can have CSR upstream of that, taking the best bits that work out from CR. Richard, were you about to say something?
Yeah, as I think I've been of your opinion. I think I've said something similar to that in the past. But then in the stand-up this morning, we said, I think you said, Ashley, how shall I say this? Everything that is configurable in the CR spec is also encodable into the CSR PEM blob. So yeah, why do we, what's the advantage of having fields on the CSR resource as well as having them encoded in the CSR blob?
It varies depending on the issue. So it varies based on the issue. Like Vault has got some stuff that it expects you to specify separately, and we could pass it out of the CSR. But it's kind of it's messy and tricky, and things vary. That's my understanding of it. What were you going to say, Josh?
So I sat in on a SIG-auth meeting when they were discussing the duration field, and they were discussing like what the field should look like, etc., what its name should be, and the topic of, you know, you can encode a duration into a CSR, but there is no standard for how that's encoded, what the names are, which makes it really difficult to consume. Because you basically have to write your own API effectively for the kind of CSR encodings or PEM encodings.
Well, I thought that before, not before and not after, were they're almost the most. They're the things I think of as being most standard. Or is there something else that I?
But it's not in the CSR.
So some bits are and some bits aren't. I guess it would be good to have a document that actually says that and says what can and cannot be represented there. I think extensions are largely things that we would be able to get into CSRs. Certainly key durations vary a lot. I think you can include them, but they I'm not confident in saying that, and certainly Vault has them externally specified. As an
Sorry,
example.
I did. Yeah, I think I just assumed that a CSR had everything in it that a certificate, an X509 certificate, could have in it. But maybe not.
No, but you can. I'm pretty sure you can put in like arbitrary data if you wanted to. I'm not even sure there's like a RFC defined byte limit to the size of a PEM file. But yeah, anything that we try and put in there would be another API, basically.
So you can go pretty big with them. Some of the quantum designs that currently exist have arbitrary quantum resistant keys in there, which can be megabytes large. So I guess going back to the main topic, which is CR being replaced with CSR, I think I would propose that currently it's not our position that that's what's going to happen, that we don't anticipate a future where we will wholesale replace certificate request with certificate signing request. That today, that seems like a reasonable stance to take, and we'd still aim to get this arbitrary EKU stuff upstream, but it certainly wouldn't be a blocker for us to do it in cert-manager 1.6. So that doesn't need to be like a decree. We don't need to like vote on it and decide it. But I think that's currently where I'm thinking. I don't really see any major disagreement with that. It's just, it was worth discussing, I think. Any other comments on this topic, or should we move on?
Do we still aim for CSRs creating from certificates if we ever do that?
Yeah, it's certainly an option. Cool. So the next thing on the list is the trust controller tool that Josh wrote, and I assume that's him that wrote that subheading for it. How I learned to stop worrying and love insecure TLS now verify. Josh, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know what to
I think your
say.
camera is off.
Yeah, I think it's off. Yeah, I'm not too sure what to say about it. Has everyone looked at the project or read the design document? Or yes, no.
Most
Okay.
people have. Maybe there were a few nods.
Yeah. So basically,
Okay, must be
the
the
idea of the trust operator is that we want to enable users to distribute trust in a cluster. That's pretty much the headline sentence. I don't think we necessarily care what trust they're distributing. And I think as a feature, we don't want to care about what kind of trust they're distributing. We just want to make sure that it is securely sourced and it is made available to all services that need it. I think they're the kind of goals that we want to be like trying to achieve. So this operator is kind of like the base case, I think, to trying to achieve that. Perhaps it's the naive case, but yeah, the base case anyway. Another goal I think we should try to adhere by is that we want to solve 80% of users' problems. I don't think we could ever solve everyone's problem. So yeah, this like base case solution is this kind of bundle CRD where you define a bunch of sources. So these are secrets, config maps, and inline strings. And they are referenced in a trust namespace. So that's just basically the cert-manager namespace. And then you define a target. And in this case, it's a config map. So it syncs a bunch of source data into a config map in every namespace. So the same thing that Kubernetes does with its root CA, same thing as like Istio does. Yeah, this was my attempt at moving the idea along in cert-manager. And having just a base solution to work from to start talking about.
Thanks. That's a cool overview of it. It's a cool thing. Like it looks like it's a cracking start. Mile, did you want to say something?
Oh, sorry, I wanted to ask a question.
Go for it.
So it does two things. It aggregates like config maps and secrets, and then it puts them in every namespace. Is that the the feature is this, right?
Yes, that's the.
It's like a spreader of secrets. It could be used for anything, actually.
Yes, absolutely. And that's again, that's like I think that is part of the goal, is that we aren't opinionated about what people want to distribute.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
I guess, does anyone else have any questions about the thing? Richard's looking very pensive.
Is it mandatory to have CRDs for this? Like, it seems overkill to have a CRD.
The reason to have a CRD is so that we can have like a God tier resource. So yeah, like bundle would be in the same class as like admission configuration resource or whatever. Yeah, so the intention is that we can kind of ring fence some kind of resource that only the kind of root users should have access to. If you talk about like possible attacks to this kind of controller, it's basically like writing to config maps or secrets or something like that. And in that case, you'll just end up with like thrashing of both clients trying to write to the same place or whatever it may be. But yeah, that is intentional.
Okay. I was wondering, just because of the cost of installing another CRD. That's the only concern. I wasn't really thinking about security. just about the fact that people will have to care about one other CRD just for the purpose of just distribution. Which might be it might be a valid use case for this, to have a specialized. And as you said, you wanted to have it cluster wide, which makes sense, because that's the goal, is to have it cluster wide.
Yeah, and like target in the API is like generic, and config map is a type of target. So you can obviously add more types of targets in the future. Like there's a discussion in the upstream issue about basically adding like a upstream bundle type, but that could just be another type of target. And you can do other things like namespace selectors and stuff like that, if you didn't want it in every namespace.
Yeah, thanks.
That's
great.
I agree that it's great. It's really neat. I think personally, there's two sort of discussion points that I would have about it. One is that this hasn't been thoroughly code reviewed by anyone, as far as I know. Like by the nature of it, as a sort of proof of concept thing. Like I certainly haven't looked through the code. I don't know that anyone except Josh, who wrote it, has looked through the code. I don't really know how we do that, because pull requests don't really work. Can't really work when you just create a repo. Maybe people go through the code and raise PRs with suggestions, sort of separately. I suppose that's a thing that needs to be done before this is sort of a first-class solution that we're providing. I don't really know that there's much unless someone has a really good solution for reviewing a repo for the first time. I don't know that it's a problem that's easy to solve.
I think in the past,
Sorry, go on.
okay. In the past, we've just force pushed a blank repo to the main branch and then made the whole code a PR so you can comment on it.
That seems reasonable. And it's not something that needs to be done urgently or anything, though.
Yeah, it's probably worth also like setting up a session to go through it as well.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple of weird things, like we have a custom controller runtime cache because we want to do. So yeah, I've tried to think about like memory usage, and this is something that I want to improve in cert-manager as well. So as well as like RBAC. So we only want to watch secrets in the trust namespace, but not in every namespace. And we want to watch config maps in every namespace. So we write like a custom cache to make that happen. So that's like a weirdness.
I guess we could maybe sit down for a session like that in the planning period for 1.6.
Is it like in core DNS where they can't store the whole of the objects for every ingress or services, so they have to only keep a tiny part of it? Yeah. Anyways, just wondering.
Yeah, that's what we're doing here. So it's quite easy in controller runtime because you can just do metadata only as like a.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Which is what I want to do for cert-manager as well. I think it's insane that we're caching every single secret data in the controller.
Yeah, it is.
The code that you just linked, Josh, there's this line. I was like, is that a full stop? Is like a semicolon in C? I was like, oh, I know, it's just like one big call of a different thing. Like, it took me a while to like parse the go.
This is my attempt at trying to make that like constructor like readable. It's not great.
Fair enough. But yeah, I'm sure we'll come back and discuss this tool a lot more. It's super cool. The other thing
maybe I have got a question. So in the example on the README, Josh, so it is still copying a CA cert from a cert-manager generated secret, and it's taking that and putting it into a config map or a secret in every namespace. Oh no, into a particular namespace in the cluster, copying it across. But if is that true? And if it is true, then aren't we still then having clients which rely? It doesn't seem any better than the client mounting the CA cert. No, it is better. It's better because the client doesn't have to mount the whole secret, so it doesn't need access to the private key. But it is still simply taking whatever CA cert manager generated rather than getting the CA cert via a different channel.
Yes, I agree to all of those things. Yeah, it's kind of like winking to the user. That's something you could do, but I agree. Again, still, that's probably not good enough. The issue we have in cert-manager is that the CA isn't discoverable until a certificate has been requested. So maybe something in cert-manager needs to be changed, or a feature of cert-manager to be able to discover the CA without requesting a certificate. Supposedly securely, but I don't know.
Nice.
I suspect in most cases it will be okay. If the route itself is outside of cert-manager, which probably is likely to be the case in a private PKI, they're going to have to create a config map or something which contains just that route to be able to use this trust bundle to distribute it. And if it's in cert-manager, then it's not the end of the world for them to directly just use the cert, but they can always copy it to a different thing before they do. That's having a route in cert-manager. There's a question there.
So yeah, so right now the trust controller doesn't really integrate with cert-manager. Like it doesn't feel first class. It doesn't play well.
It's limited what you can do, really.
Oh, maybe I just don't understand it.
No, I think you're right, and that's why I say this is like a base case approach to this problem, like a base case solution. Like it can certainly be improved, and yeah, like you say, this almost has nothing to do with cert-manager, and maybe it shouldn't, but yeah, making those two work better together would be good.
It's not necessarily related to cert-manager, but it is related to managing certs.
Yeah.
On a similar thing, I just wanted to highlight my comment on the pull request that Josh linked. I don't think we need to have this or anything, but I think we at some point should discuss whether we want to add like the ability to have Mozilla's Trust Store distributed to have this tool fetch Mozilla's Trust Store and add that into the things it's writing out for consumption. Because if you want to mount, if you say distributing a single root CA for other containers in your cluster to consume, mounting that and then having them in the system trust store inside a container is the final step of the journey to get there. And it is a massive pain to do that stuff in containers. And generally, it's a pain to do. So a cool thing to do would be to have an entire trust store for your entire system and just mount it over your system trust store. So it just replaces it entirely and sidesteps.
So you wouldn't have to install CA, whichever
Yeah.
thing we install, like HTTPS, whatever.
Yeah. I don't think that doesn't need to be like a V1 thing or anything. I think it would be super valuable to have that, but equally, I think there's discussion to be.
Yeah, that's a cool feature, actually. Oh.
I mean, if you've ever worked in an enterprise that does trust root distribution through their like managed policies, which is actually something that Windows is quite good at, it will look like that. They'll have a trust store which includes like a good, well-known source of public trust, and then add their own ones.
I suspect that Jake and I probably have similar scars from this kind of thing. Yeah, a similar scar, as we're coming to the end now, a similar scar that I have is teaching administrators what to add to a trust store so that they don't add intermediates in there. That can cause you a huge amount of pain down the line. And it's an easy mistake for them to make. And I don't know how we discourage that, but it's definitely something to bear in mind. But yeah, we are
the Cobra commands very quickly, or the completion before we finish.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you have a demo?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very nice.
Let's see if it works.
Nice way to round off the meeting.
Yeah, it's 1 minute over.
Yes, we can see your terminal.
Cool. So do CTL completion. Oh, yeah. H. Basically, your output all the garbage that you need for completion. So I think if I remember to do it correctly, what is it? That, I think. And if I restart ZSH, I can do CTL. Whoa, look at that.
Oh, it works.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's really nice. How do you have completion on namespaces and stuff? How does it work?
So you basically have to define.
That's really cool. This is much better than just a dumb completion that you usually get with Cobra.
So this is like obviously work in progress, but you can register like things called register flag completion func, and also approve this valid args func. And that's quite smart. I can basically do these kind of things. So for like a approve, for example, I know that I want certificate request. So I basically just need to implement this function, which will just do a like CR list, and then it returns the names of the CRs. Same with like namespaces, secrets.
Yeah, it's like
Really nice.
really impressive type of completion.
This is how QTTL and Helm do it.
I don't
I think
think
you said
so.
this was part of a new version of Cobra. I wondered how they did it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not quite sure how I did it before.
Probably manually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem really useful.
That is really.
I'm going to say, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
When do we rename CMD/CTL to CMD/kubectl cert-manager? I know I've been asking this before, but it didn't take, so I want to ask again.
Maybe that's the next bi-weekly meeting.
Okay. That means
Put it-
let's move on.
Stick it in the agenda for the next one. Do it now. Why not? But yeah,
Okay.
we are over time now, so I'll call it to an end. Thank you everyone for joining. If anyone actually watches this back on YouTube, thank you for doing that. It's been lovely to
Thumbs
have
up
you on.
and subscribe.
Yeah, don't forget to
Thumbs
smash
up.
that like button. And yeah, I'll stop the recording now. See you later.